about the background and how we ended up getting there, because I think that aspect of it is a bit important. Nick, if you wanted to take from there.
Yeah, I suppose we didn't wake up one day and just end up where we are, I'm 19 now, Jack is 22, and we're 3 businesses together. So we're both co-founders of Cotter Bros Firewood and Cotter Organic Lamb. They're 2 businesses that we've co-founded over the last 10 years. And then, of course, the Cotter Crate is the most recent of the businesses that we won the award for. So I guess to answer the question, how has our innovation journey been? It's been interesting. It's been a roller coaster. It's been wild. We've met a lot of interesting people on the way, done a lot of cool things for still being a teenager myself and at a very young age. But where did it all start? I suppose both myself and Jack have grown up on a farm and in typical farming ethos, much like I remember Michael Healy-Rae being on the Late Late Show at the start of this year and talking about the farming ethos, which is very much getting up early in the morning and doing something productive in the day, be it going off with the girlfriend or boyfriend, taking the dog for a walk, no matter what, but doing something productive with the day. And that's been bred into us as a result of growing up on a farm. So it's that attitude, I suppose, that's always carried us to being quite industrious people, to being hardworking and wanting to do something with our time. So funnily enough, one particular summer, the summer of 2011, I would have been 11 years of age, Jack would have been 13. Our father was trying to start a steak plant business. Now, that didn't work out, but along the way, Jack in particular was going with Dad to these open days, and he visited many sawmill plants. That's where they'd be making planks of firewood, making furniture out of logs. But what he did see was that with the very low quality logs, they were turning it into firewood. And Jack was kind of just of the mind, which I know Jack from growing up, well, why the hell can't we do this? You know, it can't be that hard. We just need to chop it up and put it in a bag. So with that mentality, we approached our parents, who weren't exactly the most optimistic in the world at the start of their 2 sons going around with hatchets and chainsaws, trying to cut up firewood. But what they did say to us, they says, right, if you can kind of convince us in some way, put forward a proposition, then maybe we'll look at it. So lo and behold, myself and Jack went into, hopped on a computer and we said, right, sure, we'll do an old survey, a bit of market research, so to speak. And what we did was we wrote up a survey. I dropped it into the national school. I was in 6th class in the time, national school. Jack was in 1st year of secondary school in Abbeyfield. And we dropped the survey in, got the kids to give it to their parents and fill it up, asking them, you know, would they buy firewood? How much would they pay? Are they currently burning firewood? And so on and so forth. And from the back of that, we went back to our parents with a bit of a business proposition saying, you know, there's a bit of potential here. Maybe we can make money. We could be buying ourselves X, Y, and Z, a PlayStation or a TV and so on, being typical 11 and 13 years of age. That's what we were interested in at the time. And they let us do it. They gave us support. They backed us and they said, right, sure, go off. And the way Dad looks at it at the time, I remember he says, what's the worst that can happen? Sure, if they never sell anything, at least they've all the firewood cut for us and we'll have it for ourselves in the house. So not the worst outcome, a bit of risk mitigation on that side. So we began off with that for about 2 years. And I suppose this is where the first lesson came in about innovation for us. And this was where we began to the issue for us was that we were taking on selling the firewood in local housing estates, dropping by net bag to the doors, calling door by door. But the issue was that we were selling, no one could tell the difference between our firewood and anyone else's. So being a little bit older, we thought, right, we need to find a way of differentiating ourselves, a way to innovate firewood so that we could separate ourselves from the competition, so that we'd command a higher price and so that we'd be able to have more customers and things would just be better. We'd be able to do things in a better way. So we looked to Europe and we came across this project called the Biomass Trade Centres project. It was a European-wide project, multi-country, huge funding from the EU to do this. And this was all about essentially creating supermarkets for firewood. So there'd be one of these every 20 kilometers. And the idea is that they'd be like filling stations for firewood. Because at the time, firewood is bought by the bag or the load. So you don't actually really understand what you're buying. And there's no minimum standards. The way I always explain it is it's like going into a filling station, but there's no prices. There's just 20-litre drums of fuel. They're all filled to different levels. They're different colors. You've no idea what you're buying. But this Biomass Trade Centre project was set to establish standards in firewood, that the firewood had to be under a certain moisture content. So it was dry. It was guaranteed to always be the same size. It was almost like, say, the McDonald's of firewood. That's what it was like. So we built that into our business model and the market rewarded us for that. We were getting way more customers. We were commanding a higher price. We got a fantastic reputation for doing good, dry quality firewood. And firewood customers are quite sticky in the sense that once they find good stuff, they won't really go anywhere else for it. So it was an incredibly successful business at that point. From 2015 onwards, when we got our certification for complying with these international standards, the business just exponentially grew. It nearly doubled in size year on year on year for many years. And Now it's a fantastic business. We've won awards. And we've achieved a number of firsts as well. We were the first firewood business to ever exhibit at the National Ploughing Championships. We were the first firewood company in Ireland to produce air-dried firewood to the same standard as kiln-dried firewood, which was, according to some of the leading scientists in the space, they thought it was near impossible. But we not only did it on a small scale, we also now do it on a commercial scale. So that's a huge achievement to have behind us. And that's the story with that first business and how we got to it. So that business is working away at the moment. It's a hugely successful business. And we learned a lot from calling door to door, learning how to sell, how to market our product, how to advertise it, how to come up with standardization of procedure so that we get efficiency in production. We were learning all these different skills when we were just teenagers, 15, 16, 17 years of age. And I suppose what it was a result of, we've learned an amazing amount and we've met amazing people along the way. But I suppose it's growing up in that environment of entrepreneurs. And I suppose, obviously, I think it was in our genes to be the way we were, but nonetheless, our dad was an entrepreneur, our uncle is an entrepreneur, but we've grown up in an environment that we've been encouraged to take on projects, to take on challenges and keep challenging ourselves, because none of this stuff is necessarily easy, but the more challenges you overcome, the more you can look at the next one and say, well, I've done this much. I think I'll be able to do this one as well. So that it was a good foundation for us. And it was the opportunity. It was what was there at the time for us. So that's where we start off on the firewood. Then the next business that we ended up taking on was another challenge. So I suppose with the firewood, that was a huge success for us, and it only made us hungry for more success. And that is where we then led on to creating Cotter Organic Lamb last summer. So we have a sheep farm, and I suppose what we were doing with the sheep farm at that time is we were organic. So that meant that we were trying to do things in an environmentally conscious way. We were not using artificial fertilizers or herbicides, and we were 100% grass fed as well, which meant that we only fed the animal grass. We didn't feed them grains that were imported. So we had a quite low carbon footprint farm as well, all about trying to do things in a better way. But the issue was we weren't getting paid for going to that extra effort because there was no market for organic lamb. Our lamb was being sold as conventional lamb in our local factory, and we were getting the same price as any other normal farmer would. So again, similar to the firewood, it was a case of looking at how can we get paid for differentiating the product? How can we get paid for doing things in a better way? And I suppose it was strictly on myself at the time and Jack. We had a chat about it, and we could see that particularly our generation are becoming more conscious. I mean, you have the whole vegan movement, but where we saw the opportunity was that if we could in an environmentally conscious way, it was almost like guilt-free meat, so to speak. So what we did was we linked into our local leader group who were running a food group, and we decided to join that food group. And from that, then we were able to get in touch with our local restaurants and hotels, and we tried to validate and see, again, similar to the firewood, doing some basic market research to validate if there was a business proposition or not, to see if there was a market for organic lamb. And surely there was. There was loads of people who were interested in getting the organic lamb. They wanted it on the menus because A, it was local, and B, it was organic, C, it was grass-fed, and then we were dry aging the lamb as well for better eating quality and flavour. So with the help of our local leader, then it was actually at a Department of Agriculture event that we launched the lamb. We were asked by the Department of Agriculture and the Woodfield Quality Assurance Scheme, who certify our firewood, to run an open day for the firewood on our farm to show other firewood producers how we can best, how to basically run a professional firewood production company. And we said, wouldn't that be an ideal opportunity to launch the lamb as well? So we got in touch with the head chef of the Limerick Strand Hotel, fantastic chef, Tom Flavin. He's a bit of an icon around Limerick at this point. And then we also got in touch with our local MEP, Sean Kelly, and both of them came onto the open day and launched the lamb. It was a hugely successful open day. We had over 400 people who attended it, and we were inundated with inquiries looking for lamb off of us. On top of that, then hotels contacted us off the back of that as well, and we ended up getting our lamb into a number of local hotels. And I suppose to finish off on where the lamb ended up, then we ended up being nominated for an Irish Quality Food Award from our success with this differentiating our model, finding a direct-to-consumer route with our organic lamb. And at the award ceremony, we ended up picking up the Rising Star Award at the Irish Quality Food Awards, which again, just huge, fantastic achievement. It's that external validation that has driven us on to further expand the organic lamb business this year. And again, it was looking at the opportunity that we had. We looked at our farm and we're constantly saying, this is where it all ties back to innovation. We're constantly saying to ourselves, how can we do things in a better way? How can we simplify things? How can we increase basically trying to maximize our assets? At the end of the day, we were producing this lamb anyway, but it was then trying to command a better price. And end of the day, it was, to be honest, I wouldn't say it was all about the financial reward. What it really was about for us is that we knew we were producing this fantastic product, but we couldn't get it to the right people. But now we can, and it's an incredibly proud moment that now we can walk into restaurants like the Woodlands House Hotel in Adair, One Perry Square in Limerick City, Tuscany Bistro in Limerick City, the Limerick Strand Hotel, and we can see Cotter organic lamb on the menu. And there's, beyond the financial reward, the actual pride that it instills in us. It's what makes all of the hard, long nights of work and the commitment that we put to producing the product. It makes it all worth it for us. So I suppose, Jack, maybe you want to pick up, that's the firewood and the lamb, but I suppose where the cray comes in is, of course, we do have a sheep farm and we try to do things in a way that complies with organic standards.
Yeah, so the whole idea for the crate kind of, it wasn't that one day, geez, you know, we should make a crate. It was more of the idea came out of pure necessity, really. We had converted from conventional farming into organic farming. First, because the subsidies and things there's a little bit more money in it and you're getting paid a little bit better for it. But more so because we knew that was the direction of the market. That's where everything is going to be going in the future, and we're the kind of people we like to be, say, on the cut. We just want to be always trying to be further ahead. And part of that was we had to vaccinate our animals. But in the process of doing that, we had some kind of things that kind of took us back a bit. So in the process of having to do this, you actually have to, well, at the time, we had to separate the mothers and their lambs. So that we could handle the lambs correctly and in as safe a manner as we could at the time. But in the process of this, it's incredibly stressful. You can imagine taking a baby from its mother. It can be very stressful, and nobody likes to do that. But what was ended up happening was some of these after doing these sessions where we had to bring in a number of animals to vaccinate, we would go out a day later and we would end up with some losses. So you come along and you try and do everything in your best interest and do the best thing, and all the research says this is the right thing to do, this is the way to do it, and then you get punished for it. And it kind of came to a point where we were like, okay, maybe this isn't the right thing to do. But we knew all the research pointed towards that. We knew this was the way to go and it was the way to do things. So rather than stop and give up, we said, okay, can we find a way around this? Is there a better way to do this? And that was kind of where the original concept of the crate came about. So the big problem we were having is you were having to bring in all these animals, separate them, and then you had the physical labor that was involved in it. So you had to bend down, you had to catch the lamb, which is stressful both on the animal and yourself, hold him in between your legs, and then give this animal an injection. And then, because you've maybe 100, 200 animals in front of you, you then have to figure out a way of separating them. So we started off first with putting a bit of a spray on them, and then because they jump on top of each other, you just end up with this rainbow of animals and not knowing what's from what. So we ended up having to take that animal then and put them into a separate pen. And you have to physically handle each animal individually. So incredibly time consuming, very stressful on the animal and yourself, a lot of labor. And the thing is we weren't even getting it right at that. Each one of these injections, we have to do it. It's costing, I think, is it 150 or €2, Nick? And then on top of that is you actually have to do it twice for it to be effective. So you have a sensitizing dose and then an immunization dose. So you have to handle this animal twice. So the idea came about where we were trying to kind of solve one of the main problems. The first one was they were on the ground and you were up standing up. So how to bring them up to you? So we came up with this idea of a box, effectively. So a box and a stand. And if you go onto our Twitter page, you can actually see some of the iterations and how it progressed on. But essentially, we got the animal, put him into the box. But as you can imagine, what was the first thing the animal did was jump out of the box. So we had this progression. We're like, okay, how do you stop them? So a lot of tinkering around, trying to kind of jam them in it and do this kind of different things. That was how we figured out about having the floor dropping out from underneath them. And then that just progressed and progressed and progressed. And as we were using it, making tweaks along the way, basically developing it as the person using it, not somebody trying to pinch a problem and then trying to design it externally. We were actually there doing it, which is kind of unique. But basically, we'd progressed on and we had this idea, and we continued to develop it on our own. But at the end of the day, in this time, we were only solving a problem for ourselves. We never at that time thought, oh, geez, this is something we could sell. And basically, where we were using it on the farm, and a really close friend of ours, Paddy Halton, who's also from True Technologies. He's the guy there from the guys who invented the grasshopper, which is a plate meter for grass measuring, a tool every farmer should have, in honesty. But he came down and he saw what we were doing. He saw how it was working, and he was like, well, first off, I think he was saying, like, where did we get that? Almost like, where did we buy it? It was that good. And we'd explained to him, and it was him then who had told us about, you should really take that to the ploughing. The year previously, he'd been to the innovation arena with Enterprise Ireland. So he said he was the first person who tweaked for us, there's something more behind it. But at the same time, in that space of time, I was also looking for a final year project. And I decided, okay, this is my chance to kind of push this a bit further. But still, at the end of it, it was never like, okay, this is something to make a big business out of or anything like that. It was just, fulfilling a need. But once we started going through this process, telling people about the idea, explaining it to them, showing it to them, that we started to realize the amount of people that were interested in it. And actually, shortly after Paddy Halton, that was it was around February, in March, I believe it was, I got to meet yourself, which, going back to the start of this conversation, I got a chance to meet you, and you were telling me about the Engineers Ireland, which you call it, competition, and the opportunities that were there, and the kind of people we were going to be, which you call it, able to compete against. Now, before all that, I would have thought not a chance. That there's no way in hell we're going to be able to do anything here. You, especially even on the day of the competition, getting to meet the different people we were competing with, the level of let's say the technical knowledge, the projects that these guys were doing were phenomenal, and then to actually end up come out at the other side of it and win it was just phenomenal. And I guess the big driving behind it and the reasoning that were giving us behind it was the fact that it wasn't just that we had a good idea, it was something real. We'd taken an idea, we'd figured out a good way to do it, we'd used it, we'd validated it. It was real, it was genuine. And that was some great push behind us, which got it to tell us, okay, we're going in the right direction, which is continuing to push us on today. But no, so far it has been very good. And I don't know if Nick wants to say a little bit more on that.
Yeah, no, to follow up, I suppose around the same time as the Engineers Ireland Student Innovator of the Year award, it was just a couple of weeks before that we actually landed up to the ploughing. And again, as Jack has covered quite clearly, we didn't have a clue what we were landing up with. We said, you know what, look, there might be something here, there mightn't be here. This is probably the cheapest way of finding out whether there is or there isn't. And look, if we get to go to the ploughing anyway, it'll be a great experience. God knows what will happen. We had no expectations going up there. So day one, we landed up to the ploughing. We had our little pop-up and we had a few brochures, and with the video playing away on the TV. And we landed up with the working prototype. And on the first day, we had to do a 30-second pitch against everyone else who was in the innovation arena, which is about 80 participants. And then also judges came around and kind of gave us a hard grilling for about 20-25 minutes, all about the features of the product and where it could potentially go. So landed up anyway onto the first day, and we went through all that. And in the evening, then we sit down for the award presentation, and they go through all the different various awards: Best Young Innovator, Best Established Startup, and then they come to Best Agri-Engineering Startup. And all of a sudden, we see Nick and Jack Cotter, the Cotter crate. And I'll never forget the day. I looked at Jack and I go, did I hear that correctly? And we landed on up anyway, and we were absolutely over the moon at that stage. We said, oh my God, this is Enterprise Ireland. They don't have a clue who we are, never met us in our life, never seen this before. And objectively, they said, you know what, there's something here, lads. This is a bit of encouragement for you. Chase this out. So that was day one. And then we wake up to day two nice and early in the morning because we were full of enthusiasm after picking up the award. And day 2 was a great day of engaging with farmers, and we had over 50 farmers saying to us, where can I buy this? When can I buy this? How much is it? When's it coming on the market? What features will be on it? And so on and so forth. And that was for us just, it was...
That was with a prototype. That wasn't even a finished product.
Yeah, it was humbling to hear. Again, goes back to it. Like, we had no idea what we had, but it was humbling to see other farmers were indeed having the same problem with the lambs that we were having. And then after that, we get to day 3, and we didn't think things could get any better. But then day 3, there was more awards where they get the overall awards for overall best, the overall best established business, and established are the best overall startup. And again, competing against some very intense competition. A lot of guys who would be a lot of very, very forward-thinking agriculture, solving a lot of big problems as well in cattle and sheep and loads of different industries. And ended up winning the best overall startup at the ploughing as well. So psychologically, it was huge between that, and then to follow it up again with the Engineers Ireland Award. I think in particular, it was the Engineers Ireland Award that kicked us on to say we need to turn this from an idea into a business, because it provided that external validation to us to know that without having conducted massive market research, look, we were sheep farmers for years. We knew that every sheep farmer, we all had the same problems essentially, but it was the likes of Gary O'Callaghan, who was the CEO of Siemens, who chaired that judging panel. It was the likes of Michal, of course, who gave us loads of encouragement, and Enterprise Ireland, or Engineers Ireland as a whole, who have given us a huge amount of support and mentorship along the way, who said to us, here's a pat in the back, lads, you're doing phenomenal stuff, you need to take this further. So I suppose that was October, and then over the following months, following the Engineers Ireland win, we sat down, and I suppose the first stage, and I would repeat this for anyone who has an idea and wants to start a business, was us sitting down and evaluating the business proposition. So we went down to our local enterprise office in Limerick, and we talked to them to see any routes around funding, and we applied for a Leo feasibility grant. And that grant is entirely designed to give you money to assess your idea, to do market research, to do prototyping, to potentially get some patenting consultancy to see if your thing can be patented or not. All those kind of things. So over those couple of months, we did some very intense market research. We gathered data to value our different markets and see where potentially we'd like to patent. The like UK are massive sheep markets. Australia, New Zealand are up there. The US, China, they're all the markets that we're looking at. And then the other significant market research we did was we put out a survey, and our friends from that'sfarming.com, which is an agricultural publication, they published a survey, and we got 550 Irish farmers to respond to it. Now, questions that were asked on the survey and the results we got was 90% of Irish sheep farmers saying that they would buy lamb handling equipment if it made handling their lambs easier and faster. 85% of those farmers saying that they would buy lamb handling equipment if it allowed them to weigh their lambs and track performance. 90% of farmers saying handling lambs is difficult. And that's very, really strong data to get at a very early point to back yourself. Because at the end of the day, all these things cost money to do, and we're lucky that we do have the fibre business and the organic lamb business to back us to take on the next opportunity. But nonetheless, it's still risking significant capital of our own money to chase an idea that we might know whether it'll work or not. But the combination of the awards and then getting the support from the Leo to do this very in-depth market research gave us the confidence immediately to say that, you know, we're willing to put our own money into this. So we did that, and then we also applied for a patent on the crate, following some patenting consultancy and looking at potentially other patents that we could end up infringing with or not. And it turns out that our idea is indeed novel and it's inventive and it covers all the categories for patenting. And over about 2 months ago, then we got notification that we have been granted our Irish patent, and then we have patents that are pending across the UK, across several European countries, in Australia, New Zealand, in the US and China. So we got that done in the first couple of months as well. And then I suppose it comes back to the core product. And what we were doing with the core product then is, I suppose we knew what we had from the ploughing, but equally from talking to lads at the ploughing. And one of the biggest lessons I can convey to people who want to, like, as I say, who want to get into innovation, be it intrapreneurship or entrepreneurship, whichever one you go with, get user feedback as early as possible. Ploughing was the very first slot of it for us. It's so much easier to solve a problem or to change a feature for one test customer than 100 really angry paying customers down your throats because the thing isn't working on when it should work, because I paid thousands for this and this machine isn't working. It's a ball of, I won't say French words, but you don't want to do that, and you just need to get it right. So get that user feedback as early as possible. And some of the feedback we got from the ploughing was that, wouldn't it be amazing if this thing could weigh my lambs? Wouldn't it be amazing if this thing could track average daily weight gains, so I could know that if my lambs aren't growing at 200 grams a day, there's a problem? And from that, we dissected that feedback for us, and we looked to see, could we incorporate that into the crate? So we have. And some of the other stuff we've done is, a lot of farmers in sheep talk about anthelmintic resistance. And it's the biggest economic factor that impacts sheep farms' profitability. And what that is, it's similar to antibiotic resistance in humans. It's where we're getting drugs that won't work anymore because we're overusing them, misusing them, and incorrectly administering them to animals who might need them. So over lockdown, and this is why I suppose COVID for us, if I was to give any kind of summary on our experience going through COVID, it was more of a blessing in disguise for us because we were so busy trying to do so many other things. But finally, the world kind of slowed down for us, and we got to relook at the business proposition. And what it did allow us to do was read, between myself and Jack, over 100 research papers all around solving this problem. And from that now, we not only have a hardware aspect, but we've invented software that can address this problem. So this was backed up by 2 facts that we found buried in different research papers. And the number one fact being that what we're trying to do with these anthelmintics is we're trying to use them to kill parasites in sheep. And parasites basically stop lambs putting on weight. And the less weight they put on, the less money that gets returned to the farmer. But it turns out that these parasites are actually, at any given time, 80% of the parasites are only in a quarter of the animals. And something that we tend to do in sheep farming is that we treat all the animals. We think there's a problem, maybe there's dirty arses out in the field, or maybe it looks like there's poor morale in the flock. And we say, right, throw a worm dose on all of them, that'll sort it out. It's very much like walking into a doctor's and you almost expect to get an antibiotic if you have a sore throat. But in fact, sometimes you don't need it. And that's kind of the way we need to go, because we're risking destroying over 50 years of advances in medicine, both human and animal, as a result of overusing these different drugs. But what we've now done with our software is basically we're trying to identify that quarter of animals that actually need treatment, and don't dose the 3/4 that don't need it, because you're unnecessarily using these drenches. And the drenches cost money themselves, but the bigger cost is that if you build up resistance to these drugs on your farm, if you can end up with complete resistance, and that just means you have to stop farming. You can't keep going anymore because it's all over. You can't control parasites, so your farm will never be profitable. And that's where we're headed over the next 20 or 30 years if we don't solve this problem. So what we've done with our software is now, with the way we identify the quarter that are poorly performing, is all that comes back is to weight gain. So we bring in an animal into our crate, and we scan that animal to their tag, which is what we use as identification for the weight of the animal. Scan that animal, and we come up and it comes up with an average daily weight gain figure. Now, for most of the year, you predict that a lamb would grow at about 200 grams a day, minimum anyway. And if we get a good lamb that looks nice and healthy, it doesn't even matter about looks, but if he lands into our crate and he weighs 300 grams a day, we know, great, jizz, he's flaking on, no need to dose him, he's perfectly healthy. Move on, he comes out of the crate. Next one comes in and, oh no, 120 grams a day. Oops, he needs to be dosed. You dose that animal and that solves the problem. And it's incredibly practical. It might sound a little bit complicated, but literally it's just like a green light, red light system. If you see red on that screen, comes up around it, and you see an average daily weight gain or under 200 grams, that animal needs to be dosed. And from our own trials internally, we only end up dosing a quarter of the sheep, which perfectly reflects the research that we've read. So it's just, we've fully developed a solution now. And I think as a result of COVID now, we've advanced a lot further, and we've entered further competitions on the back of coming up with this research. And we entered the Enterprise Ireland Student Entrepreneur Awards in February, and we ended up winning the overall ICT award at that, which is very interesting for us because obviously we're used to agri-engineering awards so far, and that would be all about the hardware of the crate. But this was one for the software, which again, I'll come back to it. If you're starting any of these ideas, external validation is what's going to give you the drive to get up off your arse when things are not going well, or when you meet challenges and you're having awful difficulty. Even when you lose faith or you might get lazy. When you meet those challenges, it's the external validation that you can look back on. When you lose faith in yourself, but when you look back and you can see all these people believe in you and they want you to succeed. Now, they can't walk the path for you, but they can walk with you, and that's what they want to do. But these people can pull you along. It can boost you back up to get up off your bum and get back on it, to drive on and kick on. And that's why I say, with any of these ideas, again, the next thing, take every single opportunity and drive on with it. Take the opportunity, enter all the competitions, because you need to put yourself out there, and that is how you will get that accreditation, get that validation for your idea, and that'll provide the encouragement for you to be able to drive it on. It's what's drove us on. As I say, I come back to the Engineers Ireland Award. That is the specific turning point for us, when we sat down after that, after the awards in the hotel room, and myself and Jack said, we're giving this a go. We're committing the next however many years of our lives and however much of our own time to this specific thing, because we know this thing has so much potential now. So I suppose, yeah, that's where we're at with the creative.
Yeah, I guess to kind of finish up on that, at the moment, I guess to kind of like Nick was saying, the kind of blessing in disguise with COVID was it allowed us to get that little bit of time, especially over the summer, because college is starting back now again. But where we were thinking about steaming ahead with what we had, to give us a chance to reflect and okay, where are we at? What does the customer want? What does the customer need? Because I guess one of the things inside it all is, and it's I guess another kind of learning in it all is be willing to kind of change and deviate your path for the customer, because at the end of the day, it's them who's going to be buying it. It's them who's going to be the end user. Because we had kind of got caught up in a ways where we had a vision for precisely how it should be. But then when you realize, okay, the customer actually wants this, this is the problem the customer actually has, you need to be willing to kind of change things. So that's one thing that has been very good. So we have a handful of crates that we've put together that we have had testing, we have had feedback on, and as a result of this bit of extra time, we've now had the opportunity to add in these new features, these new changes. So at the moment, we're absolutely flat out trying to finish developing those ones out, getting them put together and getting them to testing, so that hopefully first quarter of 2021, we are able to really get it to market.
Well, like that all sounds incredible, and it's almost like coming back to the very start, that the innovation really is in the DNA of you both. What I was going to do is going to open up to the questions to everyone, but before I do so, like kind of a question I wanted to ask direct to either one of you, and if you want to decide who goes first, like thinking over like everything over the last few years, one thing that's always been on my mind is like for Jack, I guess, like we always think about like the iterative process in innovation, but like externally looking in, like it looks like you got that like right first time. Like, is that, I guess my question to you would be like, is it the case that you got it right first time? Well, before you answer that, my question for Nick is going to be, Nick, we've a lot of engineers on the line, or people, engineers who will be kind of watching this back, and like speaking as like a non-engineer, is there any tips that you would give engineers, if like for like working with them, like how they can help you, perhaps if you don't have the same technical background for them? I guess in a general sense, like what tips would you give a non-engineer? And I can see people are starting to raise their hands. So if you just want to have a go at those questions, whoever wants to go first, and then I'll start queuing up the other questions.
Sure, I'll start, Nick.
Yeah, on working, like, I mean, myself and Jack obviously go quite hand in hand with our skill set, because we're not identical twins, and the benefit that that gives us is that whenever we come to a problem, or whenever we're trying to, I've got an idea and it's completely opposite to Jack, we get different ideas, which is great. Like my specific skill set is 100% on the commercialization, that's my side of the business, and Jack is on the CTO, he's on the technical side. I suppose my advice is don't get into too much jargon, or don't get obsessed with kind of sticking to that much. Speak quite plainly and clearly about the ideas, and understand that even for me, I plainly admit that I do have a hard time dealing with some of the engineering principles that come around the crate, but nonetheless, Jack is very good at breaking down into plain English and clearly explaining to me, well, it's actually not that complicated. This is just what we're trying to achieve. It's not that hard. And look, it does very much come down to clear communication. That's what it comes down to, and it's bouncing off each other. But like I think the other thing as well is to have mutual respect for each other. Like just because Jack is entirely on engineering does not mean that when he has an idea on the commercialization side towards maybe some marketing or advertising revenue or avenue ideas, I don't disrespect those and think he's not qualified or I'm more qualified than him. My idea is better. Everyone does have their own dedicated skill set, but who's to say that they don't have an input on anything else? And equally, when it comes to the engineering side, while I might be quite terrible at explaining what I want to achieve, provided Jack can dissect what I have in my head and then convert that into the CAD drawing of what it be with the crate, or if I'm talking about a new feature. Like for example, at the moment we're working on the floor being able to automatically, when you push in the operator side, basically we've one side here, this side the operator pushes in. But normally in the old design you have to pull a handle to release the floor, but now just to make things a bit easier, we're trying to find a way of automatically releasing the floor. Again, we kind of came up with the idea together, but Jack is specifically working on how to actually manufacture it. I just know that's what I want to achieve, whereas Jack will then work on saying, okay, realistically, using engineering principles and mechanically, how can we achieve this? But it's a good thing, as I say, in clear communication.
I guess for myself on that other question then, did we get it right first time? Absolutely not. To be honest, I think Nick might be able to correct me if I'm wrong. I think we have been developing the crate on our own farm before anybody ever saw it for, I think it was at least 2 or 3 years.
3 years.
In that?
3 years, yeah.
So that'll tell you how long we had it before we realized we had what we had. So no, it was very, very interesting to see it go along, and even to look back now, you kind of like, geez, why didn't you think of doing that earlier? But I think because everything took as long as it did, and kind of we've gone through all these processes and to the competitions we have, that at the end of it, we truly do have a far superior product, because we've had the chance to dissect it, go through it in a very methodic process. And we've had the chance then to meet an awful lot of people along the way that have helped to give us a phenomenal amount of really, really good guidance and try to help us to basically bring the best product that we possibly could.